begin by, I'd like to begin with this. In 1947, New York State passed Section 801 of the state education law. And I won't read it in all of it, but part of it says, the regions, this is the law, this is the legislature saying what the regions will do. The regions shall prescribe courses. This is 1947 when this law was passed. The region shall prescribe courses of instruction in the history, the meaning, the significance, and effect of the provisions of the Constitution of the United States, the amendments thereto, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the State of New York, and the amendments thereto, to be maintained and followed in all the schools of the state. The boards of education and trustees of the several cities and school districts of the state shall require instruction to be given in such courses by the teachers employed in the schools therein. All pupils attending such schools in the 8th and higher grades shall attend upon such instruction. Similar courses of instruction shall be prescribed and maintained in private schools in the state, and all pupils in such schools in grades or classes corresponding to the instruction in the 8th and higher grades of the public schools shall attend upon such courses. So in other words, the state legislature passed a law saying all the teachers of this state shall teach all the children of this state in public and private schools from grade 8 on the history, I'm quoting, the history, the meaning, the significance, and the effect of the provisions of our state and federal constitutions as amended and our Declaration of Independence. Judy and I graduated in '57. We weren't taught. Our kids and grandkids weren't taught. Generation after generation in this state have not been taught. Government controls education. So with respect to our charters of freedom, our Declaration of Independence, and our state and federal constitutions, with respect to them, the people have been dumbed down. They do not know, for instance, that there's a state, many of them don't even know there's a state constitution, which governs people here, it governs the government in New York State more so than the federal constitution, which hardly ever comes into play in the day-to-day administration of the state. So we have what's not been taught. We have the Declaration of Independence. It holds in part. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Rights don't come from the state. Our rights are endowed by our Creator.
Amen.
That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The consent of the governed. So we institute government to secure our rights. That's what we're all about. I'm not political, never have been. I'm all about the constitutions and defending them. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation. on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So following those words, there's a list of 26 grievances. What was going on when the Declaration of Independence was adopted? First, as our history shows, people were coming over from Europe, England, France, and other places, settling, mostly agriculture, and there was a 7-year war. France and England fought to control these colonies that were forming in America. It was the 7-year French and Indian War. That ended in 1763. Then England started to treat the people here differently than they were treating their own people back in Great Britain. People here started to petition, this is key, petition for redress of these grievances. And that went on for 11 years, till 1774, when the delegates in the colonial legislatures, they had lower houses, and the delegates in those lower houses decided to get together, 1774, to discuss these problems and what to do about it. So they got together in Philadelphia at what is now known as Independence Hall. A lot of them are familiar to you. Jefferson didn't join until the year after, 1775. And hostilities were now breaking out, mostly in Boston, but hostilities were breaking out with, between the people here and England. So in 1776, they adopted the Declaration of Independence. After listing the 26 grievances, principal grievances that they were experiencing, they then said this in the Declaration of Independence: in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress. Remember those words, petitioned for redress of these grievances. We've petitioned for redress. We've petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only with repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which would define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. There it is. Why did we declare our independence? Because the government was not responding to the people's petitions for redress of these grievances. Period. That's what it says. That's what our Declaration of Independence says. So they adopted the Declaration of Independence and immediately the delegates set up states with state constitutions. The New York State Constitution was adopted in April of 1777. And each of the colonies, went ahead and adopted their state constitution. What's in the state constitution? Prohibitions and mandates. It's the people's will. It's them speaking, telling the government what they cannot do and what they must do. That's our state constitution. That's every state constitution. And every state constitution has a Bill of Rights, which includes the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. We'll talk more about that right to petition as the evening goes on. So when they finished setting up the state constitutions and setting up the states, they then focused on setting up and adopting the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution, they went to work on it 1787. They adopted it in 1789. But on the condition, in other words, there were a whole lot of the delegates who said, okay, but on the condition that there be a Bill of Rights added. And the state legislatures then proceeded to adopt the Bill of Rights and add it to the U.S. Constitution, including, of course, in the First Amendment. Bill of Rights has, the First Amendment guarantees 5 rights: worship, free worship, press, speech, the right to assemble, get together and criticize the government if we want to, but also the 5th, the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. And every state constitution, as I said, has that same provision. So we adopted in 1791, and from 1791 to 1836, things worked really well. So what happened in 1836? Well, between 1791 and 1836, petitions for redress of grievances were honored by the government. For instance, more laws were adopted in those years by colonial legislatures, the state legislatures, as a result of petitions than for any other reason. After the adoption of the Bill of Rights, petitions directed to Congress went to committee, always. And every Monday, Congress dealt with petitions for redress of grievances. So things, the people, government understood that they were there to serve the people, and no word found its way in or out of our state and federal constitutions except by the will of the people. They understood their role, but then something happened in 1836. It was the gag rule. There were Southern congressmen, the Southern congressmen in the U.S. Congress passed a resolution, resolved that all petitions, memorials, resolutions, propositions, or papers relating in any way or to any extent whatever to the subject of slavery or the abolition of slavery shall, without being either printed or referred, be laid upon the table, and that no further action whatever shall be had thereon. We then had another war because of government's refusal to provide a meaningful response to the people's petition for redress of grievances, the Civil War. And by the time that was over, the right to petition, there's constitutional scholarly works on this subject, the right to petition had become the forgotten right until our organization came along, quite by accident, as I had indicated before some of you came in. Something happened at home while I was with GE, and it led to a lawsuit, something we had never done before. We challenged government, and we won, and we learned that government is not always benevolent, doesn't always have the public interest uppermost in mind. And I decided, this is Tony Futia, he was there with us. I decided to give up this career, very successful career that I was having with General Electric and others, to devote my life to restoring constitutional governance, at least here in New York. So the lawsuit that we won was the Tri-County Taxpayers Association, and because we were hearing from people all over the state about this issue and that issue, and it led to many other lawsuits. For instance, we sued the governor, Mario Cuomo, and prevailed for using public funds in aid of a private undertaking. We sued the comptroller and won. We were having success, and we formed the All-County we collapsed the Tri-County Taxpayers Association and formed the All-County Taxpayers Association in 1990. And we were very busy. Lots of problems were being brought to the attention of our organization. Tony was a founding board member. And there was a major case. I won't go into all of the cases, but our state constitution mandates, Article 7, the state finance article, and Article 8, the local finance article, mandates that before the government, state or local, can borrow money, issuing bonds, they have to take the issue to the voters and make their case, and then either the voters approve it or not. That's our state constitution. And so the state was on its way to borrowing money without voter approval. And the state, and we have been prevailing against the state in many of these cases. The state had never seen anything like this. People rising up and holding them accountable to our Constitution. So with this particular case, they did something new, the state. They went to Washington, D.C. Instead of using, as they had in the earlier cases, relying on the Attorney General and all of his or her attorneys, they went to Washington and hired Arthur Lyman, L-I-M-A-N, to go against me. We used a Lou Oliver in our first case in 1979, but all these other cases, I have done the work. There, as someone mentioned, it's a lot of expense, to hire attorneys to do this, and we had the ability to do it, so we did it. And we were winning and winning. But then this happened in, I think it was 1992 or 3. They hired Arthur Lyman to go against me. And there we were before the highest court in the state, the Court of Appeals. And he argues the legislature may not appropriate the bonds, the money for these bonds, as if that has something to do with them issuing bonds in violation of the Constitution. But anyway, I responded saying that'll never happen. That's an admission the state is broke. It'll raise the cost of borrowing for every school district, town, county, and so forth. In any event, now Arthur Lyman, he was I don't know if some of you remember the Iran-Contra affair and the hearings in the Senate. Arthur Lyman was the guy hired by the Senate and was asking the questions from, of Colonel Oliver North. during the Iran-Contra affair. That's who Arthur Lyman was, and they hired him to go against us. So Judge Judith Kaye, she wrote an opinion that said, now before this, before the state borrowed money, they had to go to the voters to get approval. But then she wrote this in her decision. If the legislature appropriates money for those bonds, which, by the way, were issued without voter approval, if the legislature appropriates money for those bonds, in her words, that would be permissible gifts. And she went on to say that the legislature can gift money to anybody it wants to gift it to. Hello? That's what we call judicial repeal. That's the highest court in the state judicially repealing. We didn't repeal it. The judiciary repealed a provision that requires voters, and so they haven't gone to the voters since with all the money, and we have trouble every year paying the interest on the debt. That's just one case of many that we've been involved in over all these years. So anyway, things...
It's still a violation, Bob.
What?
It's still a violation.
Well, yeah, of course. It's judicial repeal. That's not... We don't change the Constitution by ignoring it.
Well,
We put a change to the voters, and the voters voted. Yes.
I'm sorry, at that point, did you have an opportunity to take that to the Supreme Court, or did the Supreme Court refuse to hear it?
They refused to hear it.
They refused to hear it.
We've always exhausted our appeal rights, always. For instance, the most recent case, there's been a lot between that case and right now, but let me describe the most recent case. So the Constitution prohibits the state and local public money from either the state or counties, local governments. It prohibits public funds from going to private entities in aid of private undertakings. That's the language of both the state and local articles of the Constitution, our state Constitution. No public funds can be used for a private corporation in aid of a private undertaking. Okay. So 2 years ago, also our state Constitution requires that the budgets be adopted by April 1st every year, and they're always late. Hi, come on up. So they require budgets be adopted by April 1st. So around April 1st, just before, Governor Hochul submitted bills to the state legislature. Now, our state constitution says bills have to be before the legislature at least 3 days before they're acted on. They violate that all the time. Okay. So the legislature immediately passed these bills that the governor submitted. She's from Buffalo, and her husband is a high-level executive in the organization known as the Buffalo Bills, LLC. So these bills were introduced and immediately passed, and I hear it in the news that these bills were passed. Not that there's anything wrong, but that the legislature, the governor introduced and passed, and the legislature passed these two bills that authorized $600 million of state funds and $250 million of Erie County funds, which is where the Buffalo Bills are located, to be used by Terry Pugalis and his wife, who are the sole owners of the Buffalo Bills, LLC, worth, according to the media, at least $7 billion. This money is to be used, and they wanted to build a new stadium rather than renovate the one they've got. Build a new stadium, exquisite, futuristic stadium for $1.6 billion, and this $850 million will go towards that construction cost. So anyway, it's in the news, and I just hear it in the news. And I'm saying, wait a minute. I won my first case against Governor Mario Cuomo in 1990 for using public funds in aid of a private undertaking. I looked up the Constitution. It hasn't changed. And so we brought a lawsuit. Tony and I, two of us from this end of the state, and we got Will James and Josh Trost from the Buffalo end of the state, and the four of us brought an action. Immediately after we heard about this, and the lower court, we've had a lot of problems. The judiciary, I'm sorry to say, when I first started, I had so much respect for the government and respect for the judiciary and judges. It's so changed. But anyway, so they filed a case in the lower court. They dismissed the case saying, well, there's a public purpose involved here. Excuse me. There's a public purpose involved in everything that the private sector does. If there wasn't, we wouldn't buy the goods and services and they'd be out of business. What do you mean there's that's a reason? So we appealed it to the mid-level court, and they affirmed, and we took it to the U.S., or to the highest court in the state, the New York State Court of Appeals. And for the maybe 25th or 26th time, our highest court, the New York State Court of Appeals, in one line, they dismissed this case saying there's no substantial constitutional question directly involved. 25, 26 times we've taken to the high court in the state, and that's the one-liner saying there's no substantial, that's what they say, no substantial constitutional question directly involved. Excuse me, what makes one provision of the our state constitution, the will of the people, more substantial than another? That's not in our Constitution. We have the right to petition for redress of grievances. 2 wars have been fought in this country in defense of that right, the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. Yes?
Are you able to get anyone in the, quote, free press to call these people criminals? Because they clearly are.
We notify the press. They know what's going on. I've seen a big change. I used to, before I got involved in all of this, I used to be a talk show host on a Principal Albany, New York radio station, Monday afternoon through Friday afternoon for 3 hours, 3 to 6. And I had a fairly good relationship with the media out of Albany and so forth. And again, based on some work we were doing, it was written up in the LA Times and the New York Times. They referred to us, I didn't memorize it, but they were very complimentary and identified me and our organization as something godly almost. I mean, I don't remember the exact quote, but they were very favorable in those days. And things have changed dramatically. So no substantial constitutional question. And we did take it to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I got, this is probably the most disappointment I've ever had, the greatest disappointment I've ever had, that they decided not to hear this case. But when you submit a petition for a writ of certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court, you do it in a booklet form. And the Supreme Court got hold of me and saying that to redo it. So we redid it more, quote, professionally. You know, it was well done, but it was thorough. So we redid it, 45 copies of this booklet, which described everything. And I really thought they were going to hear the case, but they just, in one line, they decided not to hear it. Yes?
Do you think there's a bias against non-well-known people or attorneys as opposed to well-known popular attorneys? I'm just wondering, because so many cases of value are not heard by them. And I was just wondering if they have some kind of a bias against just the little attorney or the little guy. I was just wondering.
The thought has entered my head.
Yeah, I thought so.
Why is this? I mean, these are profound cases. I'm not political. We're not political. Never have been. We simply look at what government is doing and comparing that. If we think they've stepped outside the boundaries the people have drawn around its power, we look at it, we compare the language of the state and federal constitutions, and then we bring in action. And as I say, the judiciary is highly politicized, very corrupt. They're not going to rule against their employers. Yet, a solution is only as good as the definition of the problem. We have a problem in this country. And I think we have, I don't mean to brag or anything like that. But we have as good a definition of the problem in America as anybody, having been through all of these cases for 44 years. By the way, remember that first case against Queensbury? They were going to extensively sewer the Lake George watershed, and it was really to get, they wanted to have the infrastructure there in order to have a year-round destination with gambling casinos and everything. So when I decided, after I did all this investigation and saw and I defined the problem and decided that I was going to devote my life to this work and not ever take any money, for the effort, and I would sell off pieces of I would subdivide my land and sell off pieces of my land when we needed the money. So we subdivided the northern end of the property into 11 building lots from just under 3 acres to almost 6 acres each. And for $97,000, we built a road. I built a road to service those 11 lots. And I named the road, still there, Constitution Way. And, but what you have to, the road tied into a town road. So you have to get permission from the town to tie into the town road. The town of Queensbury said no, they didn't want, because they lost that first case. So we had to sue them over this. The right to tie into that road with another road, and we won. Just have to tell you that story too. All right, so.
What did that cost you?
Too much.
What, which one? The road?
With the road, yeah.
The road, $97,000.
No, I mean the suit.
Oh, I don't keep track. There's always a filing fee of maybe $500 or something.
Okay.
But I've never used an attorney since that first case. So, all right, so, so we have a problem. I can list some of the problems we have in this state. In educating myself after that first case, I focused on the right to petition. I mean, you can seek relief by going to the judiciary, or you can petition for, or you can go to your elected official, go to the politicians, or you can petition for redress of grievances. And I focused on writing up a thorough history of that First Amendment right to hold the government accountable, the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. Understand this: no court anywhere in America, top to bottom, has ever declared the principal rights of the people and the principal obligations of the government under the Petition Clause of the First Amendment and the Petition Clause in our state constitutions. No court has ever declared the rights of the people and the obligations. And I think as a result of work that we were doing, the U.S. Supreme Court declared in two cases, 2008 and 2011, to determine the meaning of the Petition Clause, we have to rely on the historical record. Those are words from the Supreme Court. And so we have put together a thorough historical review of our right to hold the government accountable by petition for redress of grievances, especially grievances involving violations of the Constitution. We put that thorough historical record together. There are some interesting aspects of that record. First of all, as we indicated earlier, in our Declaration of Independence, it clearly says government wasn't, we petitioned humbly, and our repeated petitions were answered only with repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which would define a tyrant is unfit to be the real ruler of a free people. So in other words, get out of here. We're declaring our independence. It was over their government's refusal to respond.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? When you went to the higher courts and they refused to hear your case, do they ever tell you why?
No.
What's the
They
why
never
not?
do. They never do. They just, it's one sentence, denied.
Maybe we should have a law.
You don't know why.
I just want to say a few words, Bob.
Yes. Tony Futia.
I'm not the public speaker here. The problem is, government doesn't give a shit what we think. They're not going to listen. The
This was-
courts don't listen.
He was employed by the town of North Castle for
50 years.
50 years. And he was
I'm
involved
going to
in
be
everything.
89 years old in December.
He was involved in everything we were doing without ever telling me. See, we were not getting answers. When we petitioned the executive and legislative branches of our state and federal government, we got nowhere. They never answered. And when we petitioned the judiciary, you know, we get from the lower courts no standing. We had no standing. What do you mean? Well, the courts had no jurisdiction. What do you mean? Well, you haven't shown that your harm is different in any kind, in kind and degree from the public at large. Well, of course not. When they violate the Constitution, everybody's harmed equally. Give me a break. But this is the crap, sorry for the language, but this is the crap that we get from the courts. You know, so something's got to change.
And they came after us when we started challenging the income tax, because I believe no one in this room is required to pay a personal income tax on their labor. I mean, that's the Constitution. And once we started doing that, the IRS came after us, the government came after us. And Bob was 7 years tied up because he was the chairman of the association. They went after him. They fined him $250,000.
Not that I wasn't, because I didn't have any income to pay taxes on, but it was for other reasons.
He fought it for 7 years. He got it down to $4,000.
Finally said,
And he brought it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court wouldn't hear it for a final decision.
Yeah.
There is no law. And what they've done is come after us. And they call us tax cheats. Just like they call people, well, you're racial, you know, you're
Conspiracy
prejudiced.
theorists.
Well, we're tax cheats because we question, whatever you question in the government, they find something to make you the bad guy. And what it's going to take to win against the government is a mass of people, because the only thing they see is votes when they look out there. And if they come into this room and see a few people, you know, what are those people going to do? You need a massive association. Back then, we had a big organization till the IRS came after us. The income was about $900,000 a year. We could have meetings at the National Press Club, put full-page ads in USA Today and the Washington Times. We could fight them. They cut our legs off from us to silence us. We're trying to build the organization back up again because it's going to take you people at a fee of like $25 a year to have representative. And when they look at what we say, they don't see us. They see this place filled
2.5%
up.
of the population they need to see. We'll get to
And
that.
that's what it's going to take to win.
2.5%.
We need a massive group of people at $25 apiece. We've got to build, we had the organization very well built up till the IRS crippled us. They had him in court 7 years.
Yeah, well, Biden just hired 80,000 more.
Yeah,
So it's going to take a lot of people to,
I'll get to the
I guess,
income tax issue
this
in a minute.
organization's big. We better listen.
Question.
We've got to work around this group. So
Question
that's-
here,
that's
Tony.
it. Yeah.
I was wondering why in 200-plus years has nobody spoken about, or seemed to be, politicians who violate their oath to the
So
Constitution?
he should be fired.
Why can't, no. Criminally charged, not just fired. They should be going to jail. That's what I want to know. In over 200 years, why do the people allow this crap to go on?
I've got 3 cases in court right now. And it's so amazing. They will not allow the defense, the government, to respond to my questions. I got one simple question. Show me the law that requires an average person to pay an income tax.
Is there
Signed by
anything
Congress.
unlawful with
That's a pretty
us
easy question.
amending the constitutions to say, you politician, you violate your oath, you're going to jail? Is there
That's the way it
anything?
should be.
Can we do that? I mean,
Not
I'm
this
just
group,
wondering.
But the people, you have to put that before the people, and then they would have to vote on it.
But it's out of control. They don't listen to us because they don't have to. Biden lets all these people in the country, violates the Constitution. He knows it. Who's doing anything about it? Not the Republican Party.
So Tony brought up the income tax. Let me explain. Relax a moment. Okay.
It's Italian.
I indicated I was a talk show host, yes?
Yeah.
On WRW in New York, in Albany. So I was getting ready for the show one day. I commuted down to Albany from the lake. And getting ready, I read about this fella named Joseph Bannister. He was a special agent in the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. He had a badge and a gun, and his job was to enforce the Internal Revenue Code. He came from a family of law enforcement people, sheriffs and whatnot, his siblings and his father and so forth. And he, according to this article that I was reading, he had prepared a report. He entitled it preliminary report. And he had given it to his immediate superior, a fella that he was very close with. They went to the rifle range a lot, and, you know, they were buddies. And that man gave it to his superior, Joe Bannister's report. That man immediately told Joe Bannister, having looked at this, the title and looked at this report, told Joe Bannister to resign or be fired. Immediately. And so Joe, you know, resigned. I got to the studio, and I had the producer track him down. I invited him to be on the air with me as the host on this show. And not only Joe Bannister, but of the few, Joe Bannister, this was 1999 that I'm talking about. But a few years earlier, Joe Bannister was out in California where he lived, enforcing the Internal Revenue Code. And he had his radio on, and there was a talk show host interviewing a woman named D.V. Kidd, who was talking and raising these issues, that there's no law that requires people to file and pay. And that when people do file and sign a tax return, they waive their Fifth Amendment rights not to be a witness against themselves. And, according to her, the so-called 16th Amendment was fraudulently declared ratified by the Secretary of State in those days, 1913, and a few other issues. Okay, so he was listening to this. He decided, and he spent the next 2 years investigating. This was his job, but he was doing it on his own time, investigating what these people were saying. And he hired, or he worked with, constitutional attorney Lowell Beecraft and other former IRS counsel and so forth. He worked with Constitution researchers. He did a thorough job. He knew how to do this. He learned, for instance, about, when he was investigating, he learned about Bill Benson. He learned that Bill Benson in the 80s was a paralegal working for a law firm. And he was in the courtroom, and there was somebody that the IRS was after, and this person was saying that the 16th Amendment, which the government relies on, was not, it was fraudulently declared to have been ratified. And here's some evidence of that. The judge in the case, according to Bannister's report, the judge in the case dismissed the case and kept the evidence. But here's this paralegal, Bill Benson, seeing all this in the courtroom. He decides on his own nickel to spend the next year going to the 48 states that were in existence in 1913 and get certified copies of everything that the state legislatures enacted with respect to this issue. He got 17,000 certified copies.
Wow.
Found out that it was not passed. He found which states were declared to have approved it that didn't, and so forth. Only a few states had passed it. Many refused, and so forth. Anyway, so here's Joe Bannister learning about Bill Benson and all these other things, and he writes his report, and they fire him or make him resign. So we have him on the air, and Lowell Beecraft, the attorney, we have him on the air, and I say to the audience, what do we do about this? it was decided on the air that we would rent the National Press Club and that we would have Joe Bannister and these people with him, and we would invite the government to send their best, most knowledgeable people on the subject to discuss the issues. Of course. So there we were. We didn't get any response from the government. There we were in the National Press Club with Joe Bannister and Lowell B. Craft and these other people, these two other former agents, former counsel, and the government doesn't show, but C-SPAN showed. And for 3.5 hours broadcast this event live with these people raising the issues and the government refusing to respond. So I'm the moderator, and I say to the audience, what do we do? Or they say to me, what are we going to do? And I had to think fast on my feet, and I said, well, let's run through this drill again in the fall, in November. And we did. We did it again, and they refused to respond and refused to show again. We went on and on trying to get answers to these questions that Joe Bannister and others had given rise to. Just because the issue really became the right to petition.
They wouldn't because they don't have the answers.
The
There is no
historical
law.
record of the First Amendment right to petition, a right guaranteed by every state constitution, the historical record clearly shows that if we have a grievance like this, a violation of our rights under the Constitution and so forth, that the government is obligated to respond. And if they don't, the people have the right of enforcement. The people have the right of enforcement.
But what does that look like, the right of enforcement?
Well, there's nonviolent rights, there's nonviolent enforcement, and then there's, I can tell you from my 45 years of experience, if something doesn't give, things keep going the way they're going, there will be an upheaval. There will be violence. Mark my words. So we have to find a way to do this, solve this problem nonviolently. That's what has led to this, what we call the plan. We've had this plan for some years now, but cases keep occupying my time. There's a lot of work involved in lawsuits, a lot. And we've had to put this off, getting this plan off, you know. All right, so here's the plan. Right here, I was invited to speak on May 2nd, last month. And I presented this plan to an audience that was maybe 35 people, 35 people, something like that, a little larger than this group now. How many of you were here then? About half of you. Okay. So I presented this plan. In my mind, I was testing the people. And I said to them, here's the plan. And almost unanimously, they endorsed it. Here's the plan. All right, so here's the plan that I proposed. I said, individuals and small groups cannot prevail. You can't stand up against the might of the government, state and federal. Individuals cannot prevail. Believe me, I know. So, and then it occurred to us, 2.5% of the population, that's all that's participated in the Revolutionary War. Why don't we set a target of 2.5%?
For membership.
2.5% agreeing to join. That's 500,000 people. But it's a big state. There's over 20 million people in this state. And I've been talking to people all over I've lectured across the country, every state, 2 or 3 times, all across this state, a number of times. And we have 2 or 3 people in 38 states or so that are willing to help get it off the ground in their state. But I see New York as first, because I live here and, I'm more familiar with. So the plan, because individuals and small groups cannot prevail, the plan is, the vision is a Citizen Vigilance Center. That, what you're looking at up there, is Thomas Jefferson's home in Monticello. It's called Monticello in Charlottesville. In front of my house, I have, up my driveway, I have on one side 6 acres, on the other side 2.5 acres. It's a beautiful acreage with a beautiful view of a mountain range. I'm prepared to give that for use of a Citizen Vigilance Center. But unless our board of directors wants it closer to Albany or for some reason, that's fine. But I'm prepared to donate that land for a Citizen Vigilance Center. The Citizen Vigilance Center would be manned with legal talent, as well as all the other skill sets needed to run a statewide organization. A statewide organization, it would be a chapter of the national organization. People have convinced me that if we're not careful, people are going to control the boards in these different state organizations and undermine the organization. So we'll have the national We the People Congress set up. You'll see in this booklet. Those of you who don't have the booklet yet, I'll hand it out in a minute. We set up the We the People Congress and the We the People Foundation in 1997. So that would be the We the People Congress was set up for civic action. The We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education was set up for civic education. The We the People Congress then would be the national organization, and there would be a chapter in every state. I'm talking about an institution of citizen vigilance, institutionalizing citizen vigilance, making it permanent. As long as we have our constitutional republic, we'll have this entity, an institution, widely regarded and permanent, something we should have done in the beginning. We should have recognized that all governments everywhere eventually are driven, the people are driven in government, are driven by the love of power and money. As Jefferson said, it's in the natural order of things for a government to gain ground and liberty to lose ground. We should have recognized it and set up, not political, no way political, an entity that simply keeps an eye on government, set up, organized to keep an eye on government wherever it is making policy, and comparing that with the do's and don'ts of our state and federal constitutions. And then, wherever they see government stepping outside the boundaries we've drawn around their power, the people file a petition for redress of that grievance. People in this school board against that, people in this school district against that school board, in this county against that county, in this state against that state, in this country against that government. And if we don't get a meaningful response, then we have the right of enforcement by redress before taxes. You know, in 1774, that Continental Congress that got together before they adopted the Declaration of Independence, they unanimously wrote 3 letters to the inhabitants of Quebec. Quebec was under the same government that we were under, and we were looking for sympathy and so forth. But they wrote 3 letters. In the first of those 3 letters, October of 1774, our delegates to our Constitutional Convention, they said this, our Continental Congress, they said this: when rulers want money, I'm quoting, when rulers want money from the people, and they have in any manner oppressed the people may retain their money until their grievances are redressed, and thus peaceably procure relief without trusting to the despised petitions. Keep trusting to petitions and getting nowhere. Let me say that again. When government wants money from the people and they have in any manner oppressed the people may retain their money until their grievances are redressed, and thus peaceably procure relief without trusting to the despised petitions. Okay, that's just one data point in the thorough historical review. You know, the right to petition, that historical record I'm talking about, goes back to the Magna Carta of 1215. The king was under a lot of pressure. And in 1215, he declares that if the people have any evidence that we have in any manner oppressed them, they can petition us. And if we don't respond in 40 days, they have the right to take everything we own. Wow. Save my life, save the Queen's life, and our children, and so forth. And then, having obtained the redress of the grievance, they may, not shall, they may then return their obedience to us. Magna Carta, 1215. Let me boil it down. We're not being governed by our Constitution. We're being governed by a ruling class. So the plan is to get 500,000 people in this state. That money, $25, we can manage that. We can manage $25. That money goes into Trustco National Bank, our bank, stays there untouched until the 500,000th person joins as a supporting member. It's not money we need, it's people we need. And this is a way to get those people. That money stays there. And when we get to 500,000, we build that building, we man it, we hire and train the Constitution monitors who put politics aside, and they simply show up and keep track of what their school board, town, county, state, what they're doing. And they compare that with the requirements, the do's and don'ts of our constitutions. They know how to petition, and if they don't get a meaningful response, their petition, it goes to the Citizen Vigilance Center, they investigate, and they recommend a course of action for the underlying supporting members, the 500,000 or more. Now the government's going to respect us. They don't respect us now. They do whatever the heck they want.
Let me just say one thing. The goal is, and we're very close to it, we have some very talented people in certain areas. We have a plan, people working on it, not me and Bob. We're working with them to have 67 TV channels, one in every state and one in every republic, Puerto Rico and whatever. We have people that work and are getting ready to retire from the major TV stations that are putting this together, because we don't have the skills to do this. I think they're meeting with Bob next week, some people, and this is very close to getting this. It's education, to get a channel in every state and all the channels at the same time hooked up if we need that, to educate the public of what's going on. And once the people know and are aware of what's going on, and believe me, on our website, we've got so much information that it will shock you. Once this gets going, and we're close, and they've been pushing and pushing us because we've been so busy in lawsuits that it takes us away from working with them to get these stations
Our
going.
challenge at the moment is, how do we get the word out? When I spoke here on May 2nd, I said, okay, you can go to the website, you can become a supporting member, the first of the 500,000, and pay, through a credit card or whatever, you can pay $25, or here's an envelope. You could put $25 check or cash in there, and you could write on the envelope who you are and what your address is and so forth. And we got 23 envelopes and 2 with cash and 2 envelopes with checks. That tells me that this concept was well received. That was the beginning. And then I held a meeting at the Hudson Falls on May 23rd at the Hudson Falls American Legion Hall, and on the 24th at the Lake George American Legion Hall. And the people in charge, or people, significant people in each of those American Legion halls, indicated to me that they would get a notice out to their full membership. They didn't. There's just a natural, in their charters, they say they can't engage in politics. And they think this is politics. It's not. Yes, it's true, the constitutional republic is a...
It's government by consent.
It's a political ideology, I suppose you might call it. But we're not involved in politics. Yes?
It's government by consent.
Yes.
That's what we get in the Declaration of Independence. That's what it is.
Yes. Yeah. So,
Wouldn't it be better called the philosophy of rule instead of what you just named it as?
You mean politics? I called it a philosophy of rule rather than politics.
well, we call it constitutional governance. This is a plan for to fully restore. We had at one
Constitutional
time.
republic, that's what we are.
To fully restore constitutional governance. That's the name of the plan. The first slide is a plan, a profound plan to restore constitutional governance.
Right. Yeah, my reference was to the small phrase that people were responding to, well, this is politics.
Yeah.
It's not politics.
Yeah. By the way, Tay is not here. I don't see him. On May 2nd, when I finished talking, this young man came up to me quietly, pulled me aside, and he said, Bob, you can't go about it that way. I said, what do you mean? So he had this idea, and I said, okay, we're going to talk about that. He was telling me, and he's right, and I never saw it, I never considered it this way. He's saying, in 1997, we incorporated the We the People Congress in New York State. The We the People Congress and the We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education. One is a 501c3 and the other a 501c4. The difference is the 501c3 cannot engage in political stuff, and the 501c4 can do some of that. Okay, so we incorporated in New York State and then applied for an EIN with the IRS to get an employer identification number. So this fellow approached me here, pulled me aside, and that led to a conversation, in-depth conversation, in which he convinced me it's wrong to proceed as a corporation,
That's right.
saying that your rights come from the state. He says, Bob, your rights come from your creator. I said, you know, you're right. I just thought you had to do it that way. So we're working to change the corporation status to what he calls an EIN, an IRS non-reporting EIN or something like that. But it's going to be a fellowship. We're going to be known as a fellowship rather than a corporation.
We do a common law trust. Okay, a common law trust, you don't even have to apply the paperwork to the,
Common law trust. Okay, this is John DeRash, another expert. Okay. So some changes are underway. We're learning all the time, right? So that's the plan. And I'm working with the American Legion. We're going to take it above to the people in charge of the American Legion at a state level and national if we have to. You know, it's an interesting situation. The American Legion is waning. They're losing members. There are a lot of people around like me who are veterans who never thought to join an American Legion Hall. I'm a veteran, Air Force. He's a veteran.
But he's been very active in the American Legion.
But his, okay. So as veterans, you know, we've taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, when government officials violate the will of the people as expressed in our Constitution, they are domestic enemies.
They've been doing it for decades.
And so, you know, we have to appeal to the American Legion and hopefully get all of those veterans excited and revive. Have a lot of people like me join and revive and get this historical institution established. Something we should have done in the beginning, knowing that all governments are the same eventually.
How close are you membership-wise?
I was going to say.
Oh, no, we had that meeting here, and then we had a meeting in Hudson Falls. There were only like 7 people that showed up, but then we agreed to have another one, and there was like 19 the second time. And then a meeting
So
in...
this is a new idea for you, or a new...
And we had a meeting in Lake George. There were only a few people who were going to have a follow-up. But we're struggling now how best to get the word out.
I think once we get TV nationwide.
Wait a minute, what's that?
Are you using social media or Facebook?
Well, we do have Anna Busser, who's on our board,
Yeah.
and it's all Greek to me because I've rejected social media. You know, you put something out there and everybody yells at you, you know, who needs that? So I've always, you know, I'm old enough, I precede computers. And so going way back, I've always enjoyed meeting with people and then going from there rather than doing it, you know, virtually. So anyway, but that's changing.
We can get this done before World War III?
Well, no,
Oh, you're laughing.
no, it's close.
Very possibility.
There are people,
People
you know,
upset.
They want to have it. I think they want to have World War III.
yeah,
I really do.
yeah, the military-industrial complex is a problem, yes, yes.
So, the question here, and that is that, do you have any controls in place to make sure that your center doesn't get
I'm going to
corrupted?
take it out.
Yeah, we have a very tight board,
Yeah,
yes, and we're on guard all the time,
okay.
all the time. I get emails, and I know, what's this? And I just delete,
Will
delete,
people
delete.
disclose their finances if they're on the board?
I don't, they've never had to, but I don't know. They're willing to, I guess.
For
I
what
mean,
purpose?
Well, I mean, that's how corruption comes in, right? You're gonna pay somebody to,
Well,
look
these are
your way,
people
let's
that,
say.
you know, I've known a very long time.
Yeah. no.
That
Yeah,
the
but I mean,
trust
at
is
some
there.
point, The board has to be replaced, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
How quick can we get there? Let's get it
Yeah.
established first.
Or maybe
yeah.
set it up.
My
Yeah,
big
we'll
thing
be
is-
on guard.
Yeah.
So these will be chapters of the national organization. Oh, at a cost of maybe, because we're late with these lawsuits, it's a killer. But about $550 each year I pay to reserve the domain names, 50 domain names. We the people of CA,
Oh, okay.
WY,
Yeah.
.us, .us, not .org, .com, or anything, .us. And
Oh, .us,
so the domain names, have been reserved.
For all 50
And we've
states.
got 3 people, at least, in a bunch of states that are willing to help get this off the ground, have been
So,
waiting.
You said you had some people that are getting ready to move in positions to, who are trained, who are, in the business of TV broadcasts or whatever. So is that what you're looking, like that sounds like a good way to get the word
Yeah,
out.
the focus, and again, tomorrow morning, I have a long discussion, a phone meeting. The decision is to get a podcast going and to do a documentary. So, and he's good at that, believe me, he's good at that. Yes,
Are
ma'am?
you familiar with Bobby Ann Cox?
Yeah.
Yes,
It's,
I've been following her, I've never
She's been
talked
to
to her.
She's
She's been
been
here.
3 or 4 times,
Yeah. I've never talked to her, but I've been following her, yes.
yeah.
Now,
apparently
by the
she
way-
lost the lawsuit. I mean, she won the first
Yes.
lawsuit, but when it went up
Yeah.
on court, they
Understood,
lost.
yeah.
Just for the same reason that you said, there was
Sound-
understanding.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nonsense. It's just utter nonsense.
The judges are bought.
It's corruption.
They're all corrupt, yeah.
I feel sorry for her, but that's
She's
another
speaking out
organization.
pretty strong.
We are
Amen.
just now, I think I mentioned this earlier this evening. We're going to identify all these type of organizations that are patriotic,
Yeah.
and that some of them, not Bobby Ann, but like the John Birch Society, been around for a long time, talking about the problem over and over again. Okay already,
Bobby Ann's got a Substack.
Yeah.
And the lawsuit, so I believe that she's a Democrat, but it was Chris Tagg and,
Mike Lawler.
yes.
Yeah.
So Republicans, so she was representing Republicans against the internment of people that you don't have to prove that they're sick, and you can put them in a camp.
Yeah.
And there's no method of getting people out of, once you're quarantined, they don't have to prove that you're, not sick.
Well, I think the solution we're talking about serves all these organizations.
Yeah. Keep government in check.
Everybody has a definition of the problem, but what's the plan?
So what were you saying about John Birch Society?
Well, they're an organization typical. I remember years ago, Bill Bush owned the Canoe Island Lodge on the west side of Lake George, and big resort complex. And there was this director, somebody who ran the John Birch Society, and I were invited as speakers. They've been around a long time, and where's the solution? What is the solution? We need a plan. Now, I've got a plan based on my experience, but if someone else has a plan, it's better, let's go. Come on. We just can't keep talking. Public information and education, yeah, it's important. Don't get me wrong. Public information is important, but you need a plan. And we've been abused long enough. I think it's time to put a collective foot down and do it under the right to petition. That's a fundamental right
Amen.
that every state guarantees, every state constitution, every one of them, and the U.S. Constitution.
We need the court still.
And it's why we fought 2 wars. We don't want to fight another war. Let's get on this. Let's institutionalize citizen vigilance. Yeah, we're up against a ruling class, powerful ruling class.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
Who is the ruling class? Who is the head of the snakes?
Let me,
The devil.
there's a,
Know that.
Aaron Russo was he produced movies, a couple of famous movies. And Aaron, remember I mentioned earlier, we were holding this event at the National Press Club, and C-SPAN broadcast it live. Aaron Russo calls me there and says he's watching. This is a famous movie producer. And he says, that's fantastic, what you're proposing. And I want to know more about this, and I'm going to do something about it. He does a fabulous documentary.
You can get it online,
What's the name of
YouTube.
America, from freedom to from freedom to fascism. That's what's happening to us.
Well, we know how we got to the problem. It's the other direction we're looking at.
Yeah, it's from America, from freedom to fascism. And to answer the question raised, he said, the heart of the problem, you see, he seems to focus on this. He starts out with a lot of us and our work and so forth, but it's 2.5 hours long, this documentary. And he says the heart of the problem, the heart of the ruling class, are the bankers and the Federal Reserve.
Absolutely.
You look at, in the U.S. Constitution, we have enumerated the powers. That's not one of them, a central bank. And then we got the central bank and the income tax, it's no by coincidence, at the same time. You can't have one without the other.
And then we have World War I.
Settlements are all the
Yes.
central banks.
And the 16th and 17th Amendment.
What's that, John?
The 16th and the 17th Amendment also all done in 1913, I believe, with the
Yes.
Federal Reserve and, of course,
Yeah.
the income tax. and the-
So we're up against power,
And money.
power and money.
Globalism.
All those in government, basically driven by power and money, I'm sorry to say.
You gotta have the army too, though.
Yeah. And they control that as well.
The money, though.
So again, we don't have any respect. The government doesn't respect the people. I'm sorry. It's true. And the only way to get their respect is to speak to them in unity, unified voice, in large numbers. Something we should have done at the very beginning. Let's not have another civil war, which will eventually happen if we don't do something. So let's, and everything we've done, if you check our record, all my communications with the government, all these lawsuits and everything else we've done, we've had massive rallies down on the National Mall. We hired the company that puts the platform in place at all the fireworks on July 4th. We hired that company, and they put the platform up there for the speakers. I was one of them, and
When was that?
we, around 2006 maybe, something like that. My kids, I have 4 kids, and they all tell me I should write a book. I don't have time. So I'm guessing when we did that. But we've had many events down there at the National Press Club. We had a big march, we had Freedom Drive. We had caravans of people from the 4 corners of the country. Took 2 days. I flew to San Francisco, got in a lead car, and we had 2 nights where we had each of the caravans had big events at some hotel on the way there. Then we get down there, and we had served this record with all these questions on every single congressman. And we invited them to come and meet us and at least tell us when they're going to respond. Didn't show.
Not one, not one.
Never, ever.
I don't care, Republican, Democrat,
Doesn't matter.
they're all in it together.
Yes.
And we're just standing on the Constitution, and we're not mean. you know, we're all about the Constitution and the Republic. It's not a democracy, it's a constitutional republic, you know?
Well,
So,
I think that they also view this type of organization as fringe.
well, they say that, of
The
course.
question is,
Do they
so how do
legitimately
you go
believe
from
that?
Fringe to faction.
Do they legitimately believe, or is this just an excuse, you know, for not doing anything?
You guys still exist.
What's that?
You guys still exist, so that's a plus.
Yeah.
And, you know, the question is, how do you organize so that
bigger,
you're no
to
longer
grow.
fringe, but you still stand on the radar, so they're not gonna feed your legs out from underneath.
Tony mentioned something earlier. If we did a documentary about what we do, about what we've done, and my kids, if we do a, you know, about me and my work as the kids, you know, this blue folder will be a chapter.
Tell your kids to
This
get on
blue
it.
folder has a label on it.
Stop putting it on you.
The label says legal termination of tax withholding for companies, workers, and independent contractors. Let me say it again. The title of this blue folder and what's in it, legal termination of tax withholding for companies, workers, and independent contractors. We were not getting any answers. Everything we tried on this income tax issue, and there were many other issues that we were fighting at the same time, but the income tax issue was brought up, Tony brought it up. So in 2003, I decided to petition the commissioner of IRS and with this petition, and copies went to the Honorable George W. Bush, the Honorable Bill Frist, the Honorable Dennis Hastert,
The honorable shouldn't even belong there.
the Honorable John Ashcroft, Attorney General, John Snow, the Treasury Secretary, the Department of the Treasury, and David K. Johnston of the New York Times. This is who it went to. And what does it say?
To the Epic Times and Jim Jordan and Marco Rubio, you would want to
Maybe.
send that to. Just send them a copy.
This is
And who
like
else?
2000.
This was back in 2003, when we weren't getting anywhere.
No, it has to go to specific people, right? It has to go to specific people. You
Yeah.
can't just send to arbitrary Congress people, is that correct?
Right.
can
You gotta
send it to
petition them in.
Whoever you need to when the state is not listening to the state of New York.
So in here, so what is this? This is us providing 12 documents with evidence and facts, each one dealing with a different angle. 12 documents. And we petitioned these people I've just mentioned, and we said if we don't get answers to these questions, I am going to put it on our website for people to download for free, no charge. And I'm going to go around the country and hand out copies for free. This is what this letter says. Okay? We didn't get any answer.
And so when you get your lawyer
So,
with the center, that's one more piece of.
yeah, so just to finish this story,
Yeah, sorry.
the blue folder chapter, okay. So we didn't get any answer. I waited, quite a while. We put it on our website. Lots of people were downloading it for free. My wife was responding to people who said, I don't have internet, blah, blah, blah. I'd like you to send it. And I said, well, we can't be sending these to a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
Can you pay $25 for this, for us to not only print it, but mail it to you? And some people say, well, I can afford $5. Okay, fine. whatever. That happened in a few cases. That was the $4,000 that you mentioned. So, so we put it on the internet, and I set up 39 meetings in 39 days, one end of the country to the other. I would drive all day, hold a meeting overnight, and then drive, and then hold a meeting, right? And we had people in charge of setting up the meeting place and everything, and it was very wildly received. And those people that were setting up the place to meet offered, at their expense, to print 100 of these and have them on a table in that room for the people who showed up to help themselves. And so for 39 days, I did this and got back. Finally, I heard from the government when I got back. It was the IRS saying to me, this, they said, this blue folder is, quote, I'm quoting, an abusive tax shelter in violation of Section 6700 of the Internal Revenue Code, an abusive tax shelter. What did this document do? We said to the government, if we don't get answers, we're going to send this out. What was this? There's a memo to chief executives of American companies. It was designed for employees to give to their employers with a letter that says, please have the company attorneys check it for its accuracy. That's all this did. The government didn't want these facts out there. And so I got back and got this letter from this low-grade, IRS, attorney saying it's an abusive tax shelter in violation. And all they wanted was it taken down. They weren't going to punish me or anything. Just take it off the website and don't hand out any more copies. And that case went through the courts overnight almost. Didn't have a chance, to really fight it and so forth. So, all right, that happened. We continue to build the plan. We had a coordinator for all 50 states. Of the 3,100 counties in the state, we got a county coordinator for 600 of those. We were formulating the plan back then. We were having these events around the country. The government sees this. So I don't know what the year was, 2019 or no, 17, something like that. I don't know. I get this low-grade IRS official agent writes me a letter. A low-grade IRS employee writes me a letter saying, I have made a determination that this blue folder is, or that, I forget what the charge was, but that it's illegal, and
they banned it.
Yeah, so he said, because we were institutionalizing, we were on our way to institutionalizing citizen vigilance. He says to me in his letter, I'm fining you $225,000, you personally. So he's fining me. So I take him to court and we prevail. The court says, they can't do this administratively. If they want to do that, they got to bring you to court. Well, so they bring me to court. Okay. And we're fighting this in court. And it takes years. Of course. I had to show by proving every nickel that came to me personally for so many years going back with evidence. And then they said, well, no money came to me. So they said, well, the organization is your alter ego. I said, no, it's not. We have a board. We have meetings. Here are the board minutes of the meetings. Everything, is kosher. It's your alter ego.
That's what he was convicted on. The
So
alternate
I had to
was his
prove,
alter ego.
and then we had to show what money came into the organization and where it came from and what it was used for and everything like that. We got the 225 down to 4,000. I finally said, listen, you have tied us up and you've undone everything we've achieved.
That was your goal.
I'm not agreeing you're right, but here's the 4,000. That ended that,
Yeah, they do, battle of attrition, and they
Yeah.
got all the time and
Yeah.
money.
So anyway, we have to go?
Yeah, a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Let's wrap up. Any questions?
Any
One,
questions?
two questions? You got
And
some?
anybody wants to be a supporting member, I've got envelopes. If you want to put 25 bucks in and put your information on the envelope, we'll get it deposited in Trustco Bank tomorrow, as we do in every case. And it won't get touched until we get 500,000 people.
Okay, Bill? Quick.
Just to point out one thing, if you ask artificial intelligence right now, what changed for individuals by the 16th Amendment, it says nothing.
Oh, yeah, they're smart.
Yeah,
That's the Supreme Court ruling, too.
yeah. Bruchhaber. That was the decision in Bruchhaber, right, Supreme Court decision. So,
Thank you.
but they used that, for many years, they relied on that. Now they say no. So, any questions?